The Weight of a Stopped World, written by Matthew Zane. They say that time heals all wounds. But what if time itself could be your weapon? What if you could reach out and grab the universe by its throat, forcing it to stand still while you moved through it like a ghost? This is the story of how an ordinary man discovered that extraordinary power, and how it changed everything. But let's start at the beginning, with a funeral. The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday afternoon, turning the cemetery into a muddy battlefield of grief and umbrellas. Marcus Chen stood at the graveside, his cheap suit already soaked through, watching as they lowered his uncle Raymond into the ground. The casket was simple. Raymond would have wanted it that way. No fuss, no unnecessary expense. Marcus barely heard the priest's words. Something about dust and ashes, the usual script. His mind was elsewhere, replaying memories like old film reels. Uncle Raymond teaching him to ride a bike when he was 7. Uncle Raymond slipping him $20 before his first date. Uncle Raymond showing up at his college graduation when his own parents couldn't be bothered.
He loved you very much, you know.
I know, Marcus said softly. The feeling was mutual.
He talked about you all the time. Always said you were the son he never had. She squeezed his arm gently before shuffling away under her umbrella.
The crowd was small. Raymond had been a private man, never married, no children of his own. He'd worked as a watchmaker for 40 years, retiring only when his hands started to shake too badly to handle the delicate mechanisms. A quiet life, a simple life, or so Marcus had always thought. After the service, Marcus found himself in the office of Gerald Pemberton, Raymond's attorney. The office smelled like old books and furniture polish, the kind of place that seemed frozen in 1985. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming," Pemberton said, gesturing to a leather chair that wheezed when Marcus sat down. The attorney was somewhere north of 70, with wire-rimmed glasses and a bow tie that had probably been fashionable during the Eisenhower administration.
Of course. Your message said Uncle Raymond left something for me? Pemberton opened a drawer and withdrew a small wooden box, placing it carefully on the desk between them. Your uncle was very specific in his instructions. This was to go to you and you alone upon his death. Marcus leaned forward, studying the box. It was made of dark wood, maybe mahogany, with intricate carvings along the edges. Symbols he didn't recognize. Geometric patterns that seemed to shift when he looked at them too long. What is it? I don't know. He never told me. He simply said... Pemberton consulted a document, reading from it directly. Tell Marcus that time is more flexible than he thinks. Tell him to be careful, and tell him I'm sorry I couldn't explain in person. The attorney looked up. Does that mean anything to you? Not really, no. Well... Pemberton pushed the box across the desk. It's yours now. There's also a small inheritance, about $15,000. Not a fortune, but your uncle was careful with his money. Marcus barely heard him. His fingers traced the carvings on the box, and he felt a strange warmth emanating from the wood. Or maybe he was imagining it.
Pemberton cleared his throat, a dry, dusty sound that snapped Marcus back to the present. The attorney stood up, smoothing his tie. "If you'll excuse me, Mr. Chen, I have another appointment. The paperwork is all in order. You just need to sign here and here." Marcus signed where he was told, his mind still half buried in the strange warmth of the wooden box. He tucked it under his arm, feeling its weight, surprisingly heavy for its size. "Good luck, Marcus," Pemberton said, and for a moment the professional mask slipped. His eyes looked tired, almost fearful. "I think you're going to need it."
The walk back to his apartment was a blur. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the city felt colder than before. Marcus clutched the box to his chest, dodging puddles and avoiding the gaze of hurried commuters. Every time his skin brushed the wood, a faint tingle ran up his arm, like a low-voltage current. He reached his building, a crumbling brownstone that smelled of boiled cabbage and old mail. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs to his studio apartment, locked the door, and leaned against it, breathing hard. He set the box on his kitchen table, which was currently covered in overdue bills and half-finished sketches. In the dim light of the overhead bulb, the carvings seemed to pulse. Marcus turned the box over in his hands, his fingers tracing the grain of the dark, polished wood. The brass hinges gleamed with a cold light, and despite its small size, the box sat in his palms with a strange, impossible weight. With a sharp breath, he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in faded velvet, lay a watch and a single folded note. Marcus reached for the timepiece first. It was unusual. The casing was made of a metal that seemed to defy the dim light of the room, shifting through iridescent shades of violet and gray, like oil slicked across dark water. But it was the face that truly unsettled him. Behind the crystal, the black numbers were sharp and clear, but the second hand stood perfectly vertical, frozen, pointing at 12 like a silent accusation.
"What did you leave me, Uncle Ray?" He set the watch down and unfolded the paper. He recognized the handwriting immediately, precise, elegant, and filled with the warmth of the man who had raised him. "Marcus, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't explain this in person. I'm sorry for a lot of things. The watch is yours now. Use it wisely. Use it carefully. And whatever you do, always remember who you are and what I taught you. Love you, kid. I always have. Uncle Ray."
Slowly, almost mechanically, Marcus took the watch and fastened the strap around his left wrist. He waited, watching the frozen second hand, expecting a spark or a sign. But there was nothing. "Okay," he muttered, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "A weird watch. Thanks, Uncle Raymond. Very mysterious." He reached for the buckle, ready to take it off, when his thumb brushed a tiny protrusion on the side of the case. It was a button, perfectly integrated into the design. Without thinking, Marcus pressed it. The world didn't just stop, it vanished. A deep, resonant hum, like a massive tuning fork struck in a cathedral, vibrated through his bones. The roar of the city outside died instantly. The rain, which had been drumming against the window, froze in midair. Thousands of silver needles suspended in the gray sky. A fly, caught in flight across the room, became a motionless speck of black glass. Marcus held his breath, the only thing still moving in a universe that had suddenly turned to stone. He looked down at his wrist. The second hand was no longer frozen at 12.
It was sweeping forward with a rhythmic emerald glow, taking away the seconds of a world that no longer moved. My God.
Marcus stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs in the ringing silence. His mind was a complete blank, white noise drowning out every logical thought. Stunned, worried, a cold knot of fear tightening in his gut. He tried to take a step, and his eyes widened. The air felt thick, heavy, like he was wading through waist-deep water. Every movement required effort, a strange resistance pushing back against his skin. What is this? He looked at the watch again. The second hand was still sweeping steadily, but the minute hand pointed to 25, and the hour hand sat exactly at 12. That's impossible, he whispered. It should have been between 3 and 4 in the afternoon. He reached for his phone on the desk, his fingers fumbling with the ghost-like resistance of the air. When he picked it up, he nearly dropped it, not because it was heavy, but because it felt like nothing. It was as if he were holding a handful of air. The screen glowed, 3:25 p.m. He looked back at the watch, the minute hand at 25, but the hour hand still pointing 12? Driven by a sudden, frantic curiosity, he began to touch everything. A pen, a stapler, a heavy glass paperweight. They all had the same impossible lack of weight. He lifted the paperweight and let go. It didn't fall. It just hung there, suspended in the air, exactly where he'd left it. Marcus turned toward the window, his breath hitching at the sight. Outside, rain filled the sky, but it wasn't falling. It was suspended in perfect vertical lines. Thousands of silver droplets were held in position, forming a dense, shimmering pattern between the clouds and the ground. Below, the street was a gallery of frozen moments. A cyclist leaned precariously into a turn, his tires inches from the asphalt. A pedestrian was caught mid-step, balanced on a single toe. A car sat angled at the intersection, and the traffic light glowed between red and yellow, trapped in an unfinished transition. All motion had been paused in mid-expression, as if the world were a photograph he had suddenly stepped into. He pressed his palm against the glass. It was solid, real, and unchanged, yet it felt like a barrier between two different dimensions. He understood then, not as a thought, but as a condition of his own body, that he was the only thing that could still move. A fly hovered near his eyes, its wings a static blur. He reached up and pushed it gently. It didn't buzz away. It drifted through the air-like resistance and simply stopped again. No collapse, no continuation, only displacement. Marcus stood still for a moment, watching the tiny speck settle in its new coordinate. It's not frozen. It's suspended. It was held in place by the absolute absence of time, and he was the only variable left inside it. The ringing silence was absolute, a heavy pressure against his eardrums. Marcus stumbled toward the small sink in the corner. A single drop of water was hanging from the leaky tap, frozen in mid-descent. He reached out and poked it. It didn't splash. It felt like a tiny, elastic rubber ball, squishing slightly under his touch before springing back into a perfect sphere. He looked at his phone again. Still 3:25. He turned his gaze to the watch. The emerald second hand was completing its sweep.
moving with a cold, rhythmic pulse that felt like the only heartbeat left in the room. The hour hand remained anchored at 12, a silent, unmoving witness. But the minute hand had changed. He remembered it clearly at 25 when he first pressed the button. In the time it took to explore the weightless tools, the scale had shifted. It sat now at 19, a sharp contrast to the frozen world outside.
Marcus remained motionless, his eyes locked on the dial as the emerald hand carved through the final moments. When the minute hand reached the 1 minute to 12, the air seemed to thicken even further, becoming so dense it was almost impossible to draw a breath. 4, 3, 2, 1. The sounds of the world returned with a deafening, violent roar. The sudden explosion of city traffic, the scream of the wind, and the hum of the refrigerator slammed into his senses. The paperweight hit the desk with a heavy, bone-jarring thud. The water drop finally shattered in the sink with a sharp splash, and the fly zipped away in a frantic blur of wings. Yes, a countdown. The rest of the evening was a blur of calculated risks. Marcus moved with a feverish intensity, testing the boundaries of the watch's silent law. He learned the rhythm of the recharge, a few seconds of rest for a short burst, but the wait grew longer the more time he stole. 5 minutes of frozen silence required a 5-second breath of reality. 20 minutes demanded 20 seconds. It was a mechanical honesty that almost made sense. A second for a minute. A fair trade. He tested the weight of his world, finding that in the stopped state, physics was merely a suggestion. He stood before the refrigerator, braced himself for a struggle, and was nearly thrown backward when the massive appliance lifted as easily as a pillow. Everything in the studio was weightless, suspended in the thick, silent air. He hunted for a source of power, batteries, a winding spring, anything, but the casing was a seamless mystery. The crown only moved the hands, clicking with a dry, hollow sound. The watch didn't run on gears. It seemed to feed on the very reality it held at bay. Exhausted by the day's impossible events, Marcus collapsed onto his bed and fell into a heavy sleep, trusting the watch to be his only indicator. He didn't wake to a sound, but to a crushing, physical terror. The air had reached a terrifying density, thick and immovable like set mortar. Every gasp for oxygen was a battle. His lungs burned as they tried to expand against the atmospheric pressure. He squinted at his wrist. The hour hand was back at 4, and the minutes had retreated to 57. He had been under for 6 hours and 3 minutes, and the world was trying to bury him alive. Panic flared, but even his heart felt sluggish against the density. He couldn't survive the remaining hours. With a leaden, shaking hand, he fumbled for the side of the watch and jammed the button down. The world buckled. The crushing weight vanished instantly, replaced by a violent rush of thin, sweet air. The sudden roar of the city slammed into his senses like a tidal wave. Marcus lay still for a moment, breathing carefully, like a man who'd recently remembered that breathing was a privilege. His lungs ached. His wrists felt heavy in the particular way that follows something trying to take something from you. He picked up his phone. 9 p.m. Still the time he went to sleep 6 hours ago. 4 texts.
all from the same number. 8:02 p.m. Hey, are you coming to Kowalski debrief tomorrow? Sato keeps asking and I keep saying probably, which is starting to sound like definitely. 8:18 p.m. Also, I have your badge still. It's been staring at me all day with that terrible photo. 8:41 p.m. Okay, the badge photo is actually growing on me. Very engineer who just saw something he can't explain. 8:57 p.m. Marcus, it's almost 9. You okay? He stared at the last one. He typed, Yeah, sorry, rough evening. Still up? 11 seconds. I'm outside your building, actually. I was nearby and got weird about the no answer thing. I can leave if that's strange. He typed, Apartment 4C, buzz twice. You know that.
She came in the way she apparently did everything, without hesitation. A paper bag from the tie place on Mercer Street in one hand, his work badge in the other. Still in her office clothes, jacket slightly damp, dark hair pulled back in a way that suggested it had started the day considerably neater. She looked at him once, the way sharp people do, quickly, completely.
Do you have plates, or are we eating out of the bag like adults? They ate at the small table by the window, the city lights doing the decorating. She talked about the Kowalski project, about Sato's obsession with the quarterly timeline, about a pigeon that had somehow gotten into the third-floor conference room that afternoon and held the floor longer than the CFO. She was funny without trying. The kind of funny that comes from paying attention.
He mostly listened, which seemed to suit her fine, though once she paused and looked at him sideways. Something happened today? My uncle died. Funeral today. She nodded, didn't push, just refilled his water glass from the tap, like she'd done it before, and kept talking, quieter now, about smaller things. Later, the food containers were pushed aside, and the city had gone to that particular late frequency. Fewer sirens, longer silences between them. She had taken her jacket off. She stayed. He didn't touch the watch the next day. He went to work, answered Sato's questions, ate lunch. He and Lena exchanged exactly the kind of glances across the office that neither of them commented on, and both of them noticed. Normal things. He wanted normal things badly enough that he almost convinced himself he could have them. But the watch sat on his wrist, and he was aware of it the way you're aware of an unanswered question in the room. In the evening, Marcus decided to check the limits of hourly activation. He remembered he was okay when set 10 hours, so he wound hands to set 6 hours. The countdown time that woke him, preventing from crushing. He started to move watch hands back. The first 3 hours, normal, almost the same air resistance. 4 hours, start wrapping up. 5, hard to get up. 5.5, lie down and wait it out. He knew what will happen at 6 hours, so he stopped right there, at 5.5 point. 5 hours would be the safe limit for sleeping. Enough countdown buffer that he'd wake before things got serious. He released the button and let the world come back.
He sat in the armchair for a long time after that. The watch was on his wrist. The city hummed outside. Everything normal, except nothing was. What do you do with a thing like this? He turned the question over slowly. The obvious answers came first, and he dismissed them. They felt like other people's answers. He could protect people. He could go places, see things, understand things that normally stayed hidden. He could rest without losing time. He
He stopped himself. He was getting ahead of the wrong question. Where did it come from first? He knew Raymond's family had been watchmakers going back generations. It wasn't something that had come up often. Raymond wasn't a man who talked about himself. But Marcus remembered it from childhood. A dynasty was the word his father had used once, half joking. Craftsmen, precise, quiet, serious about their work. Had one of them built this? When? How far back did it go? He always had keys to Raymond's house, and tomorrow he has to go there to look for answers.
Friday morning, Lena was at the coffee machine when Marcus came in. She was frowning at it with the focused displeasure. "It's doing the thing again," she said without looking up. "What thing?" "The thing where it makes the sound but not the coffee." Marcus reached past her and pressed the reset button on the back panel. The machine hummed, reconsidered, and began dispensing. She stared at it, then at him. "How did you know that?" "I'm an engineer."
I've been an engineer for 4 years, and I've been fighting this machine the whole time. She took her cup. "You're showing off." He almost smiled. "Are you around tomorrow?" She looked at him over the rim of her cup with an expression that was trying to be neutral and not quite managing it. "Depends. Are you going to look slightly traumatized again, or is this a different version of you?" "Hopefully a different version." "Then yes," she said. "I'm around." She turned and headed toward her desk, then paused and turned back. "And, Marcus, the badge photo really has grown on me. Just so you know." She disappeared around the corner. He stood by the coffee machine for a moment. Then he went to his desk and tried to think about the Kowalski project for the rest of the day, with mixed results.
The house was exactly as Raymond had left it. Quiet, ordered, smelling of machine oil and cedar. Marcus moved through the rooms. The workshop was at the back. Tools on pegboard, small labeled drawers, 3 clocks mid-disassembly on the benches. A life's work arranged with the care of someone who believed arrangement was a form of respect. On the far wall, a board of old photographs, workshop aprons, family gatherings, one formal portrait larger than the rest. A white-haired man, sepia-toned, serious. Penciled on the frame's edge, E. Beaumont, Leon, 1938. Marcus looked at it for a moment. Then he opened the last drawer on the right, the only one without a label. An envelope, his name on the front in Raymond's handwriting. For Marcus. He opened it. Inside, a small brass key, a number stamped into it. 114. Not a house key. The proportions were wrong, the shaft too short and specific. He'd seen keys like this before. Safety deposit box. He held it for a moment, then put it in his jacket pocket. He turned off the workshop light, locked the house behind him, and drove home. On the way, he passed the branch of Raymond's bank. He didn't stop. Not tonight. But he noted it, the way you note a door that isn't open yet. Marcus texted Lena when back home. Things to sort Saturday morning. Free from 2? Her reply came in a minute. 2 p.m. works. Should I bring food, or is this a you-cooked situation? Definitely bring food. Smart man. See you at 2.
Marcus arrived at the bank just before 1 in the afternoon on Saturday. Small lobby, about 10 people, 2 tellers. A delivery van pulled up outside. 2 men brought in a sealed bag through the side entrance, cash for bank operations, handed over to the teller with a signature, and gone in 3 minutes. The robbers came in almost immediately after. 2 of them, shouting, "All down! No one move!" One had a weapon, low and visible enough to make the point. The room understood immediately. Everyone down. Marcus went down with everyone else, heart loud. 2 steps behind them, close enough to hear them breathing. They worked fast. Wallets, teller drawers, and the delivery bag. That was the real target. The one with the gun kept it on the room while his partner moved. When they turned toward the exit, Marcus pressed the button.
Silence. He got up. Both men frozen mid-step near the door. He walked them outside one at a time and positioned them on the sidewalk. Took the bag, took the gun, and started back toward the bank entrance. The world came back. No warning, just everything at once. Noise, people, movement, the street alive around him. The 2 men beside him jolted and looked at their empty hands, then at each other. Marcus was on the sidewalk with the bag and the gun in plain sight. He couldn't go inside the bank now. He shoved the gun into his jacket pocket and walked. Fast, but not running. Not running. The parking lot was right there. He got in, pulled the door shut, and sat for a second, hands on the wheel, trying to breathe. Why did it stop? He looked down at the watch. Minute hand at 2, hour hand at 1. Of course. The default setting gave him just 2 minutes. He'd pressed the button at 1:02. He closed his eyes briefly. He put the car in reverse and pulled out.
Across the street, Vince Carver had been waiting in a gray sedan. He'd watched his 2 men walk in right after the delivery van left. He'd waited. Then, in the space of a single moment, they were outside, empty-handed and confused, and a stranger was standing next to them, shoving a gun into his jacket pocket. Not panicking, not running, just moving fast toward the parking lot like a man trying to hold himself together. "In the car, now!" he shouted sharply. His men didn't ask questions. They ran. He pulled out of the street and caught the tail end of a dark blue compact leaving the bank parking lot. Unhurried driver, trying very hard not to look like he was hurrying. Carver settled 2 cars back and followed. Marcus had no idea.
He sat in the car for 10 minutes. The bag was on the passenger seat. The gun dropped under the car seat. He stared at the building entrance and ran through his options, one at a time. Throw them away? Where exactly? A dumpster with his fingerprints on both? Drop them at a police station? Walk in and say what? Keep them? And do what with a bag of bank money and a stolen weapon in a studio apartment? He had no good answer. He had Lena coming at 2 o'clock, and it was 1:45. He was still sitting there when he saw her coming down the sidewalk. Early. Coffee cup in one hand, a bag from the Thai place in the other, looking at her phone with the expression of someone composing a message they found amusing. Marcus got out of the car.
"You're early," he said. She looked up.
You're outside.
Sitting in your car like a man reconsidering his life choices.
"Just got back."
Uh-huh.
She looked at him the way she sometimes did. Quickly, completely. Didn't push.
I brought food. Same place. I have a loyalty problem.
They walked in together.
The elevator was small.
Marcus pressed 4. The doors started closing, and a hand came between them. Vince stepped in. 40s. Calm. Nothing in his hands. He nodded once at the floor panel, like a man who lived in the building. Lena shifted slightly. Marcus looked straight ahead. 4th floor. The doors opened. Vince followed them out. Marcus put his key in the door and felt the muzzle press into his back before the lock turned. "Inside," Carver said quietly. "Both of you." Lena's coffee cup hit the floor in the hallway. Marcus caught her arm and moved her in ahead of him. They sat on the couch. Vince stood across from them, relaxed, weapon visible but not raised. "Who are you?" Marcus said. "What do you want?" "You know what I want," Vince said. "I don't have anything." Lena looked sideways at Marcus. "He's serious. I've been to this apartment. There's nothing here. He doesn't even keep food." "I had food," Marcus said. "1 container of leftover rice doesn't count as food." "It counts." "It really doesn't." Vince looked at them both with the expression of a man recalibrating his expectations for the evening. "The bag," he said. "In your car. Passenger seat." "I don't know what is your name?" Vince cut him. "Marcus." "Marcus." Vince's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I watched you walk out of that bank. I watched you get in your car. I followed you here. So let's skip the part where you tell me you don't know what I'm talking about." Lena went very still beside him. Marcus said nothing. "She's got nothing to do with this," he said finally. "Maybe," Vince said. "That depends on you." He tilted his head slightly. "The bag, I understand. The gun, I understand. What I don't understand is how. And that's the part you're going to explain to me." "I just grabbed them and walked out," Marcus said. "The door was open." "The door," Vince repeated. "Yes." "You walked my 2 men out through an open door?" Silence. Lena glanced at Marcus very carefully. He didn't look back. Vince took out his phone and made a short call, then put it away and waited with the patience of someone who had learned that patience was more frightening than noise. A knock at the door. Vince crossed to it and opened without fully turning his back. 2 men came in. Marcus recognized them immediately. Same jackets, same faces he'd walked across a sidewalk an hour ago while they stood frozen and empty-handed. They looked at him the way people look at a stranger. Nothing there. Vince caught Marcus's expression, the recognition that wasn't being returned, and turned his head toward his men with something almost like amusement. "Funny thing," he said slowly. "Looks like he knows you guys, but you don't know him. How does that?" Marcus pressed the button. The silence fell. Vince frozen mid-turn, his men locked in the doorway, Lena beside him suspended between one breath and the next. Marcus stood up into the thick, still air. Then he went to work. Vince first. Jacket, shirt, pants, shoes. Then the other 2. Piled everything in the closet and shut it. Phones from their pockets went into his bag. 3 men in underwear in his apartment, with no clothes and no phones. He went back to Lena. She was still on the couch, one hand slightly raised from whatever she'd been about to do. He crouched and lifted her against his chest, closed the apartment door, and continued to carry her to the elevator. Held her upright while the doors opened and got them both inside. Lobby, street,
passenger seat. He was breathing harder than he'd expected by the time he got in beside her, and pressed the button. The world came back. Lena gasped and grabbed the door handle. She looked at the street, the car, Marcus, then back at the street. We were on the couch.
Yes.
There was a man with a gun. Yes. How are we in your car? No time for that now, Marcus said. Later. He started the engine and pulled out. Marcus! Later. You carried me? I was on the couch and then I was in your car and you were breathing like you just moved furniture. I did move furniture. She stared at him. That's the part you're confirming? He drove. She turned to face forward, then back. The man with the gun. Still in my apartment. Still. She stopped. Is he dead? No. Unconscious? No.
She looked at him for a long moment and then let it sit, which took visible effort. He said something about money, she said. In your car. There's money in your car? Yes. How much money? Enough. Where are we going? She asked. We're going to your place. Good. She nodded. Pack a bag? A few days? Yes. Right. She looked out the window. Are you FBI? No. Secret Service? No. Some kind of program? Government thing? No. Spy? She paused. Actually, no. Spies don't live in studios and fight with coffee machines. I'm an engineer. I know you're an engineer, Marcus. Engineers don't have bags of money in their cars and men with guns in their apartments. She turned to face him fully. Was it hypnosis? Because that's the only thing that makes any sense. You hypnotized us all, and I just, walked to the car? Something like that, Marcus said. She looked at him flatly. That's the worst lie I've ever heard, and I once told my landlord my apartment flooded to get out of a lease. He said nothing. He pulled up outside her building. She got out, then paused with the door open. Please tell me you're not an alien. I'm not an alien. Because I want to be clear about something. She leaned on the door. Whatever this is, whatever you are, I'm handling it pretty well, I think. But if at some point, in some intimate moment, something unexpected appears, she gestured vaguely. A tentacle, extra set of arms, anything in that category, that's where I draw the line. Lena, I'm just setting parameters. Go pack your bag. She went. Marcus sat in the car watching the street, the engine running. She was back in 40 minutes. Dropped into the seat, bag between her feet. Okay, she said. Hotel. And I'm picking it. Best one in the city. We're supposed to be hiding. Exactly. She buckled her seatbelt. Whoever that man is, he'll look in every cheap place first. Nobody hides in a 5-star hotel. It's too obvious in the wrong direction. She glanced at him. Also, I've had a very strange afternoon and I want a bath. He almost smiled. Where? The Ritz-Carlton. She paused. The money covers it, I assume. The money covers it. Good. She looked out the window as they pulled away. You're going to explain everything tonight. Yes. Everything. Yes. She nodded slowly, watching the city go past. Marcus. What? The furniture thing really is a good place to start. The money. What are they in? Lena asked. Bank sack. She looked at him.
We need a normal bag. You can't walk into the Ritz-Carlton carrying a bank delivery sack. He glanced at her. I'm right, she said simply. He pulled over at the next mall entrance. They found a luggage store, bought a mid-size case, nothing flashy, paid cash from the envelope Marcus had packed from the apartment. Where's the bag? Back seat, floor. She climbed into the back without discussion and pulled the bank bag onto her lap. Marcus drove. Behind him, he could hear the rustle of counted bundles, neat and methodical. A few minutes passed. Just over 100,000, she said. That sounds right. She climbed back to the front. The new case zipped and settled on the back seat floor. We're definitely staying at the Ritz, she said.
2 blocks further, Marcus pulled into a side street and stopped beside a large grocery store. He wrapped the gun in the store bag from the luggage place, walked to the garbage bin at the sidewall, dropped it in without slowing down, and was back in the car in 40 seconds. They checked in under Lena Greenwell. The room was on the 14th floor, quiet and wide, the city laid out below the window like it was trying to make a good impression. Lena looked around once, dropped her bag on the chair, and looked at Marcus. I'm having a shower, she said. You're ordering food. Everything on the menu. We left mine on your floor, and I'm not forgiving you for that. You left it? Under circumstances beyond my control. She headed for the bathroom. Order everything. I'm serious. The door closed. The shower started. Marcus picked up the room service menu. After order was placed, he sat on the edge of the bed and turned on the TV. Surfed past 3 channels and stopped.
A reporter outside a bank. Police tape. 2 units visible. The ticker at the bottom read, Midday Bank Robbery. Investigation underway. He turned it up slightly. No suspects described yet. No details on what was taken. Police were reviewing street and bank cameras footage. Cameras, whispered Marcus, and turned it off before Lena came out. They ate at the small table by the window. Proper food. Hot. Unhurried. The city did its evening thing outside. Neither of them pushed toward the conversation that was waiting in the room like a third person at the table. At the same time, across the city, in a police station that smelled like bad coffee and older bad coffee, a Detective Reese sat alone in front of a monitor. 53 years old, twice divorced, the kind of man who had stopped being surprised by people a long time ago. He rewound the footage and watched it again. 2 men walking into the bank. 5 minutes of nothing. Then the same 2 men on the sidewalk outside, empty-handed, confused.
And beside them, a third man, already walking, bag in one hand, the other shoving a gun into his jacket pocket. Walked to a blue sedan, got in, and drove out. Reese had watched it for the first time 3 hours ago and immediately sent it to the tech unit. Tampering, splice, equipment glitch, something. The answer came back 5 minutes ago. Clean record. No interference. No cuts. He rewound it and watched it again. Then again. And again. Then he stopped the video and wrote down the blue car plate number. Checked. The car owner? Marcus Chen. The address? The same he got from Vince. He picked up his coffee, found it cold, and set it back down without drinking it. A smile on his face.
Vince stood exactly where Marcus had left him, in the middle of the apartment in his underwear, watching his 2 men figure out what had happened. They were loud about it. "Shut up," Vince said. They shut up. "Search it. Everything." They moved through the apartment quickly, opening drawers, checking cabinets. Their clothes were inside of a closet, folded with what seemed like unnecessary neatness. They got dressed without a word. "Phones," the taller one said.
He took our phones. Vince reached into his inside jacket pocket and produced a second phone. Slim, separate number, different carrier. He watched his men register that Marcus had checked every pocket and still missed it. He said nothing about that either. He dialed. Listened. Rick. Apartment 4C, building on... He read the address from the entry panel photo he'd taken that morning. Door. 10 minutes. Rick got the door open in 8 minutes. Vince told his men to keep looking. Names, papers, anything with an address. Then he stepped into the hallway and made a second call. It rang 4 times. Reese? It's Vince. A pause. We had a one-time arrangement. That was it. Yeah, Vince said, but you know how it works. Silence. I need everything on a man named Marcus. He read the address. Where he is right now. Whatever you can find. You'll get 10 times more than the last time. I'm working a scene. I know which scene, Vince said. Take your time. Another silence. Longer. I'll call you back, Reese said. Vince hung up.
Lena finished first, set her fork down, poured herself more juice. Looked at him. Okay, she said quietly. I'm fed. I'm clean. I'm calm. She folded her hands on the table. Talk. Marcus talked. He kept it simple. The funeral, the attorney's office, the cedar box. An uncle who never explained anything, and a note that didn't either. A hidden button he pressed by accident. The world stopping. The silence. Moving through frozen air like water. Then Raymond's house. The photograph. The envelope. The key. Then the bank. And everything after. Lena listened without interrupting, which he suspected cost her considerably. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Where is it? Marcus reached into his jacket and set the watch on the table between them. She looked at it, then at him. May I? She picked it up before he answered, turned it over, examining the case, the face, the hands. Her fingers moved across the surface with quick, curious intelligence. Lena? The silence dropped. She knocked on his head lightly with one knuckle. Solid. Waved a hand in front of his face. Nothing. Then walked to the window and looked out. The city below was completely still. A taxi frozen mid-turn. A woman suspended mid-step on the sidewalk. A pigeon hanging motionless above the opposite roof like it had been painted there. The whole world holding its breath as far as she could see. She stood there for a moment, taking it in. Then she spun around, threw both arms in the air, and let out a scream of pure joy that nobody in the universe could hear. Whoa! She buckled the watch on her wrist, then looked at Marcus, frozen at the table. Marcus was at the window, standing. Both hands pressed flat against the glass like he'd been inspecting it closely. He had no memory of getting up from the table. He turned slowly. Lena was cross-legged on the bed, eating his chocolate mousse with his spoon, watching him with the calm satisfaction of someone who had just solved a problem. Give me the... He was on the chair, standing, hands up, no pants, shoes on the table. Lena... Silence. Lena, I swear. The room went completely dark. Her voice came from somewhere to his left, low and amused. Can you catch me? Light.
She was across the room, in the narrow space between the bed and the wall, dancing in her shirt and nothing else, bare feet, hair loose, completely absorbed in her own performance, like he wasn't there at all.
He was standing on his right leg, his left leg extended behind him, his whole body tipped forward, arms out, the letter T. A perfect, motionless, human letter T in the middle of a 5-star hotel room. He held it for a moment, out of pure structural necessity, then very carefully lowered himself. "I have a master's degree," he said to the empty room. He was in the bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet seat, fully dressed, both hands on his knees, like a man waiting for a very slow appointment. He looked around the small, bright room. He stood up, opened the door, and walked out with as much dignity as the situation allowed. When this performance started, he called her name with genuine alarm, the watch, the limits she didn't know. Then with anger, short, clipped, an engineer who likes things under control. Then he laughed, really laughed, the kind that comes from somewhere you forgot existed. Then, somewhere between the T position and the bathroom, he just stopped fighting it. Stood there, or sat there, or balanced there, and let it be what it was.
And now he was at the mirror. Both hands raised, pulling his ears wide apart, mouth open, eyes crossed slightly from the effort of maintaining the position. Written on the mirror in her lipstick, in careful, neat letters. So cute. He stared at his own reflection for a long moment. The ears, the open mouth, the lipstick. He started laughing and couldn't stop. He was on the bed, on his back, naked. The room was dim, curtains closed.
Lena appeared beside him, lying on her side, head propped on one hand, watch loose on her wrist, hair down. The dancing version of her, warm and slightly breathless, looking at him with an expression that had moved well past entertained into something more deliberate. "Are we done?" he said. "With that part," she said, placing the watch carefully on his chest. Marcus moved to the nightstand. She leaned down and kissed him, slow at first, her fingers curling chest, then less slow as he pulled her closer. She tasted of chocolate and wine she hadn't offered him yet. Her hair fell around his face, and he pushed it back gently to see her, and she smiled against his mouth at that, a private smile, just for the two of them in the dark.
He rolled her onto her back, and she went willingly, her hands moving across his shoulders with the calm efficiency of someone who had decided what she wanted and saw no reason to delay. Her skin was warm under his hands, her breath catching when he found the places that made it catch. She pulled him down and arched up to meet him, and for a while, the city and Vince and the watch on the nightstand ceased to exist entirely. Afterward, she lay across his chest, one leg over his, her breathing slow and her fingers tracing absent patterns on his skin, the room warm and dark around them. He lay looking at the ceiling with the specific contentment of a man who had been through an objectively insane day and arrived somewhere unexpectedly good. After a while, he turned his head. The wine bottle on the nightstand. The small plate of chocolates beside it. He looked at Lena.
"Did you go out?" he said slowly, "while making that mess?" She didn't move. "The wine," he said. "The sweets. You went to the bar." She lifted her head
and looked at him with an expression of complete composure. "The bar was lovely," she said. "Very peaceful. Nobody bothered me." "Lena." "The chocolate selection was excellent." She put her head back down. "You're welcome." He opened his mouth, closed it, reached over, poured 2 glasses, and handed her one. She took it without surprise, as if this had always been the plan. "To your uncle," she said, raising her glass slightly. He looked at the watch on the nightstand, at the wine, at her. "To Raymond," he said.
"We have to go to Las Vegas," she said. "Lena, hear me out. We walk into a casino, you do your thing, we walk out. We show them who is the boss." "Maybe," Marcus said. "But first we need to deal with what we're actually in. Vince, the money, the key." She was quiet for a moment. "The money," she said. "You could have stopped time and dropped the bag back inside the bank." He didn't answer immediately. "You're right," he said. There was no time to think. I just moved, and then it was too late, and He stopped. "Yeah, you're right. We'll figure it out in the morning. We should talk about the key. Box 114. Raymond left it for a reason, and Vince is..." No answer. He looked down. She was asleep. Completely. Instantly. Peacefully asleep. One hand still open on his chest, breathing slow and even.
He lay in the dark, looking at the ceiling for a while. Then he closed his eyes. The morning light came through the curtains in thin, pale strips. Lena woke first. Slowly, the way you wake in an unfamiliar room, one sense at a time. Warm sheets. Marcus beside her. The faint sound of the city below. Then something else. She opened her eyes fully. A man was sitting in the armchair across the room. 50s. Jacket. Watching her with the calm, unhurried expression of someone who had been there for a while and was comfortable waiting. She said nothing. She reached under the covers and found Marcus's arm and shook it hard. "Marcus." He stirred. "Marcus." Harder. He opened his eyes. She didn't point. She didn't need to. He followed her gaze to the armchair. The end of part 1.